Kia ora. Hey, it's Mona here from the Humans Connecting team. Our podcast is all about soothing, supporting, challenging, and inspiring you to become a connected human. The content of our podcast is of a general nature, and consuming this content is not the same as seeking individual advice from a connection mentor, registered mental health professional, or coach. Conversations about human connection address loneliness. We destigmatize loneliness here at Humans Connecting. We do that by talking about loneliness openly. Loneliness conversations necessarily include a range of topics which at times may be difficult for us to talk about, to hear, and to sit with. If throughout our conversation this is true for you, we encourage you to please contact a mental health hotline. The link in the episode description can help you find some immediate support for many places you may be in the world. Our advice to you is this: meet yourself where you are and how you are right now. If you don't feel up to it, we'll be right here ready to be by your side when you're ready. We're glad you're here. Let's jump in.
An issue with the size and scale of loneliness and social disconnection requires a variety of solutions, from offering individual support to developing national responses through national policies. It's simply too big for one person to solve alone. So a more effective approach is creating a movement that fosters countless connections, as well as advocating for government and private sector action on the issue. In this episode, you and I are going to explore the power of one such human connection movement. Hello, it's Phil. Welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Humans Connecting podcast. I'm Phil McAuliffe, speaker, author, connection mentor, and the founder of Humans Connecting, and I am your host. At Humans Connecting, we destigmatize loneliness and help you improve your social health and the quality of the connections that you feel in your life. You might be here because you've decided that it is time for a change, whether that's because you've been experiencing loneliness or you've been learning about the importance of being socially well on your overall well-being. Whatever brings you here, we are here for you, no matter what you do for work, how you identify as a human, or where you are in the world. And all the ways that we support you, your workplaces, and your communities are at humansconnecting.org. It is really inspiring to see more and more people feeling called to act as awareness grows about the impacts of loneliness and social disconnection. People are working on developing AI solutions. Others are wanting to unlock the connective power hidden in social media, and others are fostering human connections through in-home visits and hosting community events. You've met many of these change makers on this podcast, and you'll meet more in the future. And these are indeed exciting times in the human connection sector, with some, like us at Humans Connecting, working to have a positive social impact. However, for all of that excitement, loneliness remains a tough topic. It's a problem that we're comfortable acknowledging for others, but not within ourselves. There's no one-size solution to this either. It being the solution requires energy, perseverance, and a movement that empowers people to identify and pursue the connections that they themselves need. And our guest today has created one such movement. And for some of you, Pete Bombaci requires no introduction. But if you're not familiar with him, I'm going to introduce him anyway. Pete Bombaci is a visionary leader dedicated to creating a more connected world for happier, healthier societies. He believes that by doing the right thing every day, exceptional results are created. His engaging leadership style comes from an enthusiasm and genuine desire to help others and the belief that building a more connected world will lead to happier and healthier people and society for all. In 2016, Pete launched Genwell, Canada's human connection movement, focusing on promoting proactive face to face social connections for better health, happiness, and longevity. Before Genwell, Pete led the Movember Canada Foundation, growing it into the largest fundraising in the country, raising 142 million Canadian dollars for men's health. With 20 years of experience in the beverage and hospitality industry, Pete draws on both for profit and not for profit backgrounds to drive social change and build a more connected world. In this conversation with Pete, you're going to hear what prompted him to create Genwell. You're going to get his insights for creating a connected community, and you're going to get his advice if you feel called to help the humans around you feel more connected. Pete and I have been friends for a few years now, and he's been a frequent source of support for me and me for him as we've navigated our work over the past few years. I think it's time that you got to meet Pete for yourself. So I'll see you on the other side of this amazing conversation. Pete Bombaci, welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast.
Well, Phil McAuliffe, I have been looking forward to this call and this conversation for a long time because you and I have been on this journey for quite some time. And you're one of the people who I've been connected to for a large part of the journey that I've been on over on this side of the world.
I I don't want to go too far into the how long have we been connected because I feel it could age both of us terribly. Um, so but it's been a few years, hasn't it?
I think we've probably been connected for 5 years,
Yeah.
and I can't remember what the first connection was other than we've had many a WhatsApp call and
Yeah.
many late night, early morning calls and conversations. And, in those early days when most people had no idea what you and I were talking about, those conversations were comforting, supporting, coping, uh, and all
Right.
contributed to where we are today.
I have to say, I'm glad that you said it because, yeah, there is, and you've heard me say this a few times, Pete, but there's this ironic loneliness and a not fun, not the kind of comedy irony. There's an ironic loneliness on working on loneliness. And when we can find people with whom we don't have to complete the sentence before someone is nodding to the point of, hurting their neck, or like, oh my God, me too. Yes, yes. And, a problem shared is a problem halved.
Mm.
So it is so, so comforting to have you on the other side of the world, over in Toronto, doing what you do. So I can sleep, and you've got the night shift in
Yeah.
keeping the movement going.
Yeah,
Hey,
what I'll say, Phil, is that honestly, it's not that it was loneliness was the topic that I think made it so difficult. It's that we were breaking new ground. We now talk exclusively about social health, which is, the combined efforts of social connection. And so there's a great book, Adam Grant wrote a book called The Originals, and he talks about what it's like to be the first in, the leader, the sector creator. And it's not fun.
no.
First people laugh at you, then they look at you funny, then they start to question you, then they think you're crazy. And then all of a sudden things start to come together and they start to go, I wonder if what he's saying maybe does have some importance. And here we are 5 years later, and most people are now saying, oh my God, that's what Phil's been talking about for 5 years, or what Pete's been talking about. And wow, that's crazy that they were actually on it long before the pandemic and long before anybody else understood.
it is humbling. I'm not quite sure that's the right word, but we'll go with humbling. But it is humbling to look back in the rearview mirror. And I don't know about you, Pete, but the last, I don't know, I still forget what year it is at times. And, 2020 just feels like a few months ago. Um, but it does, on those days where it just feels like walking through wet concrete, and and trying to drink molasses or something like that, it just feels like such a slog. It is helpful to know to look up in the review mirror, be reminded of how far we've come, and just take a moment to go, shit, we've really like we've created a path, creating a path that others can navigate by as well. So it is yeah, I hope from time to time, Pete, like on those tough days, that you can look up in your review mirror and see the amazing work that you've been doing, the trails that you've been blazing and creating, and appreciate what you've done simply by putting one thing in front of the other. As I just read in your bio, like because when you show up each day trying to do the right thing, amazing things happen.
Hmm.
So, Pete, that's a lovely conversation. That's all we've got time for now. Thanks so much for being awesome. um, hey, Pete, just in case someone, like you're new to someone, just in case, and the
Yeah.
listener and the viewer is unfamiliar with your awesomeness as I am, who are you and how did you get to create the Genwell Project?
Yeah, so my name's Pete Bombaci, and I am the founder and CEO of Canada's Human Connection Movement. Frankly, actually, we used to say a Canadian-led global human connection movement, but we realized without any money, we couldn't do the globe. We had to get Canada taken care of first. But as a human connection movement, our mission is to make the world a happier and healthier place by educating, empowering, and catalyzing people around the importance of face-to-face social connection as a proactive step that we can all take for our health, our happiness, our longevity, and for the betterment of society. What we aren't is a mental health campaign. We're a social health movement that's working to swim upstream with a positive, proactive, and inclusive message that allows all of us to recognize that we can all be lonely in our lives and that we are all part of the solution to the disconnected world that we're in today. We're also not anti technology because look at this call we're having right
Mhm.
now from
Yeah.
the other sides of the world. When used properly and intentionally, so digital technology can be a great supplement. Even social media can be a great supplement to the connections that we need to make face to face. But whether it's time or geography or traveling, that sometimes it just can't happen. So, we've been working for the last 8 years. We've now built programming that we deliver in workplaces, classrooms, communities, municipalities, and seniors organizations. And we run 7 campaigns throughout the course of the year that are intended to catalyze people to take action. What we've done for many issues in society is we've stopped at the education part for the last 50 years. Exercise, eating well, don't drink too much, don't smoke. What we understand is that behavior change takes more than just education. First off, we've never educated people on this information. So that's the starting point. Because if you don't understand the why human connection is so important for your health and well being, then you may dismiss it as we called it a soft skill for so many decades. Now I think people are waking up to recognize it's no longer a soft skill. This is a fundamental human need that we all have, whether it's to thrive at work, at home, in our communities, or as a society. So we built those 7 campaigns to help people take the actions that we all deep down inside desire, need, want, crave, whatever word you want to use. But oftentimes, in a society where we've created the most individualistic society in history, we don't feel comfortable talking to a stranger or knowing our neighbor or being part of our community or getting involved in volunteering or all the ways in which we can build healthy connection habits throughout our lives. So the other question, Phil, you said is how did I get here? And
Yeah.
honestly, it's almost news to me. I think after 20 years of being in the hospitality industry, I jokingly say what I learned in 20 years was that happy hour had nothing to do with cheap drinks. Because if there was nobody in the bar that was selling cheap drinks, you'd go down the street and line up at the bar that was twice as expensive where all the people were. And then I had the opportunity to go over and run Movember, the mustache charity, and I saw the power of community when you saw how people who had good and bad mustaches came together for 30 days because they had a purpose. And their purpose was both community and helping other people. And that's a really powerful combination. And that's really what we're trying to do at Genwell, which is when we can help people understand how much they need human connection and they can also recognize the impact that they have on other people. Well, that combination and the fact that it costs you nothing and it can be as easy as talking to a stranger, why that is a really powerful proposition that can get most people to say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I could make my life better and your life better just through a simple connection. So it was really a long journey of, awakening in my own life. When I launched Canada's Human Connection Movement, we're not a loneliness campaign. We're a human connection movement consciously, because when I launched this, I'd never ever known about loneliness. Nobody ever told me about it. I'd never thought I'd been lonely a day in my life. But now that I understand loneliness, I recognize I've been lonely many times in my life. And that's the wake up call, which is we all will experience it, whether it's job loss or relationship issues, death of a loved one, injury, illness. There's only 9,000 ways in which somebody might feel a sense of loneliness or disconnection from other
Mm.
people. Throw in technology as another one, or the crazy things happening around the world, or the fast pace of life. There's a million reasons why we can feel disconnected from other people. But if we actually awaken people to what that is, and that's a natural emotion and a natural reaction of feeling disconnection, then we can actually inspire them to take the actions. Because we have to stop doing, Phil, is waiting till people are in crisis or sick before we actually start to help them, which is what we've been doing for the last 50 years in regards to this issue.
Hey, what an intro. And feel free to drop the mic and just sort of go and Bombachi out. But for now, listener and viewer, there is a couple of things in there. Before I ask Pete, I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions, of course. But listener and viewer, when I introduced Pete just before, I talked about, I asked that question, how do you create, how do you respond to something as enormous as loneliness and social disconnection? And I gave you like the recipe. And one of the ingredients in the recipe was patience and perseverance. Pete, another P word, and I commented in that intro of how many P words are required in this. Pete and Phil, while Phil starts with P, it doesn't sound like it, but Pete definitely starts with P. I want to draw in another two P words that Pete said, and they were purpose and power. And with purpose, when we work towards a purpose, that's powerful. That's powerful. And kind of like, I don't know where this analogy is coming from, but we're just going to go with it. Kind of like I guess, Pete, I'm speaking to a Canadian, so I'm all about ice right now in my mind. But how does a glacier reshape the landscape? Slowly and yet powerfully and with purpose. Like it's flowing downhill, just very slow and doing its thing over time. It reshapes and makes a valley. You can definitely see where it has been. And I really invite you, I feel like the letter P, if this was a Sesame Street episode, it's going to be brought to us by the letter P. And it is so powerful to know that simply showing up in the way that supports others is phenomenally powerful for all involved. People receiving that support and also the people giving the support. So I just wanted to like underline those. I noticed those P words and I don't know if you listener and viewer noticed them at the time, but they were ones that Pete kind of like it really magnified what he was saying and why what he is doing, he and the team at Genwell are doing, really matters because it comes down to giving people purpose. And I'm going to add another P word, place in community through the 7 campaigns that they run each year. And I want to get into that in a minute. But Pete, thank you for that. As I sort of went all Sesame Street there for just a moment, but it was almost too good to let pass because it really is what you're saying there really taps into something that is so fundamentally different and needed, which goes beyond the education, beyond the loneliness is bad, go and connect. You're actually helping people to do the hard thing, which is connect.
I'm going to throw something in here, Phil, because I think it's a really important thing for people to hear, and I know you and I've touched on this in the past, is I really don't think people understand loneliness. And so, the word purpose is, unfortunately, as a society, we tend to look out for what's in it for me. So the starting point is, let me explain to you how important this is to your health and well-being. Though single greatest contributor to happiness, reduces anxiety and depression, increases empathy, compassion, resilience, builds your self-confidence, all those things that I'm sure you've talked about on shows for eternity since you've been doing this. So a starting point for me is you have to help people understand why they should be engaged. Then I could actually tell you that I call it the dirty little secret, that you can actually help other people just by connecting. And I'll say this on top of that, which is we never use the word kindness in our campaign. And some people say, well, why not? Like, isn't it kindness? Well, it can be. But the problem is that when you say kindness to most people, they think you mean muffins or taking out the garbage or shoveling snow. They think of tangible things. People don't understand that the words that we use, the way in which we connect with people each and every day, can be part of the solution to building a happier and healthier society. But we have a long way to go to making sure that I think is it 30 million in Australia and 40 million people in Canada understand just what loneliness is, what human connection can do for them, and that they can do it for other people as well. I think we can't make the assumption that people have any clue that a simple conversation with somebody could change not only somebody's day, but their life.
Yeah, yeah, so true and well said. I think Pete, it was something, and it was a conference um, that it was, one of your conferences a few years ago, and you had someone from the University of British Columbia talking about the findings of a study about the power, essentially, of saying hello. And it's really stuck with me, and it's something that I share frequently here at Humans Connecting with the audience. And it is the findings of the study were that not only did the person receiving the hello receive a positive boost to their sort of connection feel good factors, people witnessing it also got, and not involved, they weren't said hello to, they weren't, engaged in the conversation, but they witnessed it. They also got a boost. And it sounds so trite to say, well, it all can start with the power of hello, but it actually does. It can actually start with the power of hello and then building from there.
Yeah.
Um, and I love that study because it is so um, it's so demonstrative in how powerful, another P word, how powerful this is simply by saying hello. And, it doesn't need to be a 15-minute conversation. It can be, even like an acknowledgement, like looking someone in the eyes when you're walking past them, and like, depending on where you are in the world, like a chin wave, like you just sort of throw your head back a bit and wave with your chin. If you're in, I don't know, do they do this in Canada? But in Australia, like the country driving wave, where you're driving along and you see someone and, on a country road, and you sort of just put the one finger up and that's the wave, that's the hello. Um, so yeah, like those things matter.
Yeah.
Incalculably, they matter.
Yeah, well, that research is Dr. Gillian Sandstrom, and she's a sweetheart, and she's a born Canadian, but is now teaching funny enough, in the kindness lab. She heads up the Department of Kindness at the University of Sussex in the UK, and she spoke at our first conference, and it's actually her research. As you know, Phil, we just finished our second annual Talk to a Stranger Week.
Yes.
And Talk to a Stranger Week was inspired by Dr. Gillian Sandstrom because her research showed what you just spoke about, which is, people watching, but even a simple smile can actually change somebody's mood. It also showed that if we talk to a stranger every day for a week, that we become more confident and less fearful and more likely to continue the habit moving forward. Our own research in Canada shows that those who talk to a stranger once a week are up to 3 times happier than those that don't talk to strangers. And yet only 20% of Canadians talk to strangers every day. And there's Dr. Nick Epley out of the US, who's shown in his research that it's almost 100% of the time that when we talk to a stranger, that both parties are happy that it happened. So, in this entire conversation of those little things that you can do to make a difference in somebody else's day, we've been telling people, I think of it as scaffolding. We've been telling people for 50 years not to talk to strangers. And yet, I think talking to strangers may be the entry point for all of us to actually, whether it's become more confident in our social connection, whether it's the impact that we can have on other people's lives, whether it's about starting conversations that could lead to new friends, could lead to new things to do with other passions that you might come across that you might learn something, you might have a laugh, you know. And yet we've told people for 50 years, Phil, not to talk to strangers. What were we thinking?
Yep. 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 Stranger danger and all of that stuff. It is, listener and viewer, I just got like this surge, this real surge of like almost like, yes, this we can do this. And for you, viewer and listener, you may have pressed play based on, you've recognized that you've been experiencing loneliness, you are experiencing loneliness, or you realize that as a human you will be experiencing loneliness a time in the future, and you want to be like working on your social health and strengthening that. Yay, you, well done. When we're in the depths of a loneliness experience, certainly for me, when I'm in the depths of a loneliness experience, my head can be a really hostile place. And I don't know about you, Pete, but when I'm in the middle of a loneliness experience, I turn into the like this master storyteller. I can weave an absolute yarn that has me as the villain, has me as the victim, has me as all playing all of the roles. Like all of this is happening to me. And I can sort of be like really kind of without wanting to judge myself harshly, but I become so self-absorbed. And, everyone and everything is out to get me. I've got to protect myself. I've got to like it's time to kind of be like to roll up in a ball like an echidna or a porcupine or choose your, armadillo, like your armored animal of choice and protect myself because everything and everyone outside of me is out to get me. I know from research that that is very common. And Pete, you and I know the work that's being done. You probably know it far better than me in actually being able to cite it. But the work that's being done analyzing how people become like politically and socially extreme, and how loneliness and social disconnection can feed that because we have this fear. Loneliness makes us fear. It puts us in fight or flight, and everything that, even the people who are trying to connect with us are a threat. We see it as a threat. And so when a stranger is married with stranger danger and someone goes, "Hey, how you going?" We can like, "What do you mean?" Like, and want to take them out. Um, and avoid that threat. The reason that I felt that surge, and I wanted to really just sort of bring this to you, viewer and listener, is this is something that is really simple, not easy, but simple to remember, and something to really, a little thing to push yourself in practice when you're experiencing loneliness, when the world is against you, when you're against yourself, to respond to a kind, not a kindness, but to respond to a greeting. Take the time, respond to a greeting, and if none are coming to you, offer the greeting. And it's just possible. The surge of energy that I just experienced there was this is possible. This is possible. This is the lifeline that is available to you when you notice it. And this is the thing that, can be grabbed to help take you out of like the quagmire, the quicksand of a loneliness experience. Thank you for that, Pete.
My pleasure, my friend. I use this in my workshops. I say, how many people have ever been caught up in their head and not treated themselves well? And it's pretty unanimous in almost every room because we've all been there. And
Yeah.
it makes me think of two things. Number one, the word rumination, which is really what you're speaking to. And the traditional thinking was that the average person had 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, that 85% of those thoughts were negative and 95% of those thoughts were repetitive. So when we get inside that head of ours, we're not very good to ourselves. And so, that led to, I think, the research out of Massachusetts General Hospital at the end of the global pandemic that said that social connection is the single greatest preventative action to avoid depression as a result of when we are connecting with somebody, whether it's the barista at the coffee shop, whether it's somebody at the grocery store, whether it's somebody at the dog park, or a stranger on the street that you just wave good morning and say, how you doing? Or, good day. The reality is, all these things that we do to interact with other people, as you said, they're simple, but they're not always easy for people. But if we can understand that we need to get out the door is probably step number one, because we're not going to run into strangers in our own home. But, if we can get out and we can understand that these simple little actions can change not only our life, but other people's, I think it is the starting point for getting to a better place where we can get out of our own heads and actually get into the present and get into a conversation about the sun, the game, the weather, the whatever the topic is of the day. But
Yeah.
those topics and those casual conversations can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Too true. And I often say, and particularly our work here at Humans Connecting, I love I love initiatives that and ideas that help people get out the door. But one of the things about a loneliness experience uh, in our work is that not only is it, it's, many people have a job. And so they get out the door to go to the job or, go to the area of their house if they're working from home and log on and start doing the job. We can be, and this goes to the whole concept of, we can be alone in a room full of strangers, in stadiums full of people, um, and not feel seen. The issue is, for me, not only getting out of the house, but it's getting out of our heads. And this goes to that, it is simple and devastatingly effective. Um, but not easy. It's a challenge. And so part of the challenge is like doing the hard thing and then celebrating our awesomeness for doing the hard thing, not going, oh, I only just said hello to someone. What do you mean you only just said hello to someone? You bloody said hello to someone. You got out of your head for just a moment. Like frankly, that shit's worth celebrating because you chose connection. You
Absolutely.
chose connection. Now, I just want to say, our poor baristas, like the baristas in our coffee shops, like, yep, they, at least the ones that, I go to here in Canberra, like, they do a great job and, it's lovely to be a regular and to be recognized and stuff. But I just wonder if sometimes they're just like, I just need to make coffee. Like there's a line of stuff. But I think the important point here is that every opportunity choose connection. And here at Humans Connecting, subscribers particularly, you know that this is often the given advice at each and every opportunity. Choose connection. You cannot go wrong when you choose connection. And even if it didn't go according to plan, like you chose connection, that shit's always worth celebrating. Hey, Pete, I've got a couple of more questions for you, but just need to take a quick break.
Hi, this is Pete from the Humans Connecting team. Working in a high-stress environment can be energizing, but it can also be overwhelming. It can be easy to feel lost and isolated even when surrounded by colleagues. But imagine if you could transform your workplace into a supportive and connected team. We have a service called Creating Connected Workplaces delivered by Phil McAuliffe of Humans Connecting and Dr. Hans Ruscher Iserman of Annecy Behavioural Science Lab. The program combines world-leading academic rigour with empathetic expertise tailored to addressing the unique challenges of social connection in high-stress settings. Annecy Behavioural Science Lab's advanced measurement tools provide concrete and actionable insights that reveal the true state of your team's connections. Humans Connecting's ability to connect with the hearts and minds of humans in high-stress workplaces helps turn your workplace from one ruled by stress and overwhelm into one enjoying higher productivity and higher engagement where the humans within it thrive. Our scientifically backed and human connection focused methods empower you to create evidence-based interventions for your team. And look, we want that for you. So if you're ready to make a real change, tap the Creating Connected Workplaces link in the show notes below, book your initial call with Phil and Hans, and let's create your connected workplace together.
So welcome back. Pete, there was something I've heard you say as part of the origin story for Genwell and the work that you're doing now. There was a particular event in your part of Canada a few years ago that sort of provided, no pun intended, a spark of an idea for you. What was that?
Yeah, there was a blackout in 2003 on the eastern seaboard of North America. 50 million people went without power for 2 to 7 days. And at the time, I was working in the beer industry, and after it happened at 4:10 in the afternoon, it was a Thursday afternoon, and it was about 31 degrees Celsius outside. Well, so it's summertime over here in Canada. It's a beautiful day. Getting home was a nightmare because none of the lights, none of the subways, none of the trams, none of this, nothing worked. So people were out everywhere. And so with lights not working, getting home was a bit of a nightmare. But once everybody got home and checked on their loved ones, what you started to see was that people were taking care of each other. Nobody was worried about their next meeting. Nobody was worried about, you couldn't watch TV. Back then, it wasn't phones, but you couldn't use your computer. So people started to come file out of their homes and they started to help people. I saw a lot of it directing traffic, helping seniors, so many beautiful things because in times of a crisis, we are an amazing human species. But later on that night, I went over to a friend's. I rode over on my bicycle to a friend's house who was probably 10 blocks away from my house. And his party, he had a propane barbecue. So we were able to still make use of the barbecue. Everybody brought over their best food and their best drinks because we were all afraid they were going to go to waste.
Mm.
And that party turned in his backyard from 2 to 10 to 20 to 30 people. And everybody just made the time to get connected. So I walked out on his front porch about 9 o'clock at night. It was still beautiful, it was still sunny, and the street was packed with people. And I just thought it was such a special occasion. And I walked out onto the street because it was on a side street. I lived on a very busy thoroughfare at the time. And I said to the people on the street, "Hey, I wish I lived on a street like this where everybody knew each other." And they all looked at me and said, "We don't know each other." And it was right there, Phil, that I actually thought to myself, that's crazy. And I heard about this in many other places, in workplaces and classrooms after the fact. But the fact that we live beside people each and every day, and yet they didn't know each other, and yet they looked like they were having a great time together. So we are missing these opportunities. That was before the pandemic. We were already not spending time with the people who make us happier,
Mm.
healthier, live longer, make our streets safer, make our communities better. And so we weren't making time for it. That's in 2003. And so that really was at that moment, I thought that was the catalyst that made me go, well, wouldn't it be a good idea if we created a couple weekends a year, which we now call Genwell weekends each spring and fall? And that was the original inspiration that got this thing going. And then in 2017, just quickly, I met an expert, a global expert on the social determinants of health, Dr. Quam McKenzie here in Toronto. He works at the World Health Organization at times. And his comment was, "You're going to be very successful with this movement." He said, "But you need to know one thing." And I said, "What was that?" And he said, "You need to educate people first because people have no idea what you're talking about and why they need it." And that's really what we've spent the last 8 years doing, or 7 years, really, Phil, is trying to educate 41 million Canadians so that people are more conscious and intentional around their social connections and social health. Because as long as we don't understand it, as long as we ignore it as a fundamental need that we have as a human being, we will continue to struggle with our mental health, our physical health, with our societal challenges, because until we recognize we're all more in common with each other than what differentiates us, we'll continue to struggle as individuals or as a society.
Mm. Pete, I just want to say thank you. And a recurring theme through this podcast, if you're new to the Humans Connecting podcast, guests frequently share their origin story. If this was part of a Marvel franchise, and this the common theme, overwhelmingly, no matter which way this it has taken them, but there was a point in time, an event, and it may have been like a collective event, like a power blackout affecting millions of people, or a conversation with someone, but there was an event, and each and every time, viewer and listener, you'll know what I'm about to say here. The response has been curiosity, and and a fundamental question of like, well, why? Why does it have to be this way? Why
Mm.
can it not be something else? And one of the things that I just wanted to say here, and I'm saying this, on behalf of myself, but also like listener and viewer, if you are listening and you've got an idea, you've had a response, and whether or not it's, pandemic related, or, we're a few years, on the other side of the pandemic, and there's something, and it may have been something just simply within your life, an awareness that you've had, or within your family or friendship circles, or in your local community, or in your workplace, or whatever like that. We can want to not, it's a terrible way of phrasing it, but go with me. We can not want to do something about it until we know how to do it. And so we wait and we wait and we wait for an answer to come. And that idea, no one gets the benefit of your that spark that you've had. But Pete, you had this, by walking, going to that barbecue, going out onto the street to see it, like to talk to the neighbors who you thought were the best of friends, like, and it's Canada. So you're all curling in the winter, or they were all curling in the winter together, and you're in Toronto, so you're all talking about the Maple Leafs, or the Raptors or something. But you have, this kind of, I'm almost there with you, because I've had that moment where it's just like, huh, this is really interesting. X, Y, and Z over here are kind of coalescing with A, B, and C. And, oh, maybe. And it's that moment of genius, almost genius, that is unique to you. And you've gone, you know what? Something can be done about this, but critically, listener and viewer, something needs to be done about this. I don't know what's next, but I'm going to trust myself that the way will appear as I'm building it. And I really invite us all to sit in that spot. Because here on the podcast, the Humans Connecting podcast, I often talk about you, viewer and listener, being at that fork in the road. And you're aware of your loneliness. You can't be unaware of your loneliness anymore. Like, unawareness is not an option. But you have two choices. You can continue doing what you have always been doing potentially, and that's keeping busy, hoping, wishing that the thoughts and feelings will resolve by themselves. And you might get some relief from that, but you're going to find yourself back in this spot again, sooner rather than later. Because the ways that you've been avoiding and distracting, there's the law of diminishing returns. It stops working as it did. So you do like twice the effort for half the results. Or you can go right. And Pete has just described a way that he went right. He did something that has catalyzed, has grown organically. And Pete, I'm going to say, like, you've got some skills, you've got some benefits, like you've got some skills, you've got some background and expertise, but you also didn't know how to create a human connection movement.
Not at all.
And you built it. And listener and viewer, whether it is taking steps towards connection, whether it is taking steps to be the change that improves the way that people live, or not, or supports the way that people live in your community, like, pay attention to that spark, and you don't need to wait until you know exactly how to do it. Because frankly, You make it up as you go along. Like, and there are people around you with skills and experience who go, oh, maybe you could do it this way. As Pete has been for me for so many times over the past few years. He's like, oh, try this. You might want to think of it this way. And without being as overt as that, sort of the sharing of experiences, and he doesn't know it yet, but like pennies are dropping all through my head. I'm like, oh, I could give that a go. I could give that a go. Um, and slowly but surely, don't wait, please. Don't wait until you know exactly how the outcome is going to be. Whether that's taking a step towards connection or like fundamentally changing the way humans live. Like take the step and the way will reveal itself. That was quite heavy from that, or quite grand from that example. But I think so many of us, whether like we lived through the 2002, 2003 blackout, but all of us have lived through a pivotal societal event over the last few years. And we've probably all had these ideas of like, something could be done better. Something could be done better. Yeah, Pete, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
My pleasure.
Because it is such a powerful little story. And it's the power of the awareness there that really can change the world.
Every one of us has the opportunity to change the world. If it's not for a million people, maybe it's for one person or five people or 10 people.
Yep.
And I think right now, to your point, Phil, I think we need leaders and leadership in our world more than ever before. I don't think our governments are the people we can look to any longer, because they're battling the extreme crisis. They're the person who needs a hospital bed, the person who needs whatever. They're working on wars and economic issues, and they aren't worried about the upstream prevention. They're not worried about, they can't be worried because they can't do it all. And we have to take some accountability for ourselves, I think, in society. And so if we can help, each of us can inspire some talking to strangers or talking to some neighbors or getting your friends together or anything that we can do, to me, that is the simplest demonstration of leadership, much needed leadership in the world today, because I think those interactions that we have really will change the world.
Yeah. Yeah. That will change the world in the way that it needs to be changed. Whether
Yeah.
that's like, makes the history books in the future, or like it changes the world for individuals around us. All is
Absolutely.
what's needed. So, Pete, with that powerful kind of origin story, that genesis of Genwell, over the years, what have been? I'm really curious, like to get under the bonnet of this, and like what have been some of the hits and misses of like some ideas that sounded great but didn't land, or things that you thought were like, but actually have really like got legs and have started running.
It's a really interesting question, Phil, because I can only think, quickly off the top of my head, I probably can think of one thing. Nothing has been nothing has been a failure. But there's probably been some timing issues along the journey. Early on, we tried to get ambassadors on board, get some celebrities on board who could help us spread the message. But as Quam said to me, if people don't understand what you're doing or why you're doing it, then there's probably little chance that people are going to come on board. And then we didn't really have an idea as to what we wanted them to do other than to start talking about it in whatever sector they were in, whether it was a politician or or a media celebrity or whatever it might have been. We I'll tell you the biggest issue, Phil, and it's not that it wasn't that it was a failure. And frankly, this is actually what what makes things, um, this is the resilience that actually got us to where we are today. Because what I will say, Phil, and you touched on it earlier, this has been the loneliest journey of my entire life. My entire career was spent in the hospitality, and even Movember was a very social, industry or sector or job. This was a job where I'd talk to most people and they'd ignore me, laugh at me, or not even respond to emails or phone calls. But here's the biggest challenge that I got out of that was I had people early on, I had somebody say to me, well, isn't this just like Canada Day? And why would we need this? Somebody else said to me, well, who made you the person who needs to save the world? I had somebody else say to me, where's your business model? And I don't see a business model here. So why are you bothering? And so everybody wanted to question every aspect. Even in the launch of Talk to a Stranger Weeks 2 years ago, somebody said you could never say talk to a stranger. That'll shock people. They will never pay attention. I said, we're trying to shock people because we want them to understand the truth. And so I would say the biggest struggle, and again, and I don't say this with any arrogance, that I don't think we've made any mistakes along the way, other than we were to start 8 years ahead of the average. We're still at the 1 yard line, Phil. Both of us are still people are just starting to get it now. And so, what I will give ourselves credit for instead of looking at it as a negative is the number of people who questioned everything that I did. I had a professor tell me that I needed to pick a lane, either be about seniors or young people, or be about, some communities, it marginalized communities. He said, you can't solve the problem for the world. And I said, yeah, but when it comes to social health, you can't do it alone. So we can't focus. Telling seniors, as one example, telling seniors that they need to buck up and be more social, to me sounds more like kicking a horse when it's already down. It's actually, we need to awaken everybody else about the seniors issue. And so when I awaken the rest of the population, maybe they'll talk to a senior more often. And so it works for everybody. If we all know about our own loneliness and everybody else's loneliness, then we can proactively start creating conversations that solve for everybody's disconnection in the world. So, the big thing for me is we didn't make any mistake. There's no program that we started that we've stopped, and we're just about to relaunch our ambassador program again. We just happened to launch it too early, and we had to wait until the campaigns and the programs were a little more developed. And now we're at the point where, okay, we were a little ahead of our curve. Now we need to go do it again.
Yeah, yeah, it was a good idea, but now the time for that idea is better. The timing is better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Pete, you just said something there that really, really kind of in a good way, but like touched a nerve. And um it's that whole and I remember getting this advice, a pretty major life decision for me at the time. In hindsight, it seemed like a really easy, obvious decision, but at the time was like, as sleepless nights as I'd go, about whether to leave my job, my well-paying job in the public service, um, and start out doing this. And I received some advice, and I forget exactly where it was, but it didn't really matter, but it landed with me. People give advice from their level of fear. And the advice was I was 45 at the time, and I could access my superannuation, my pension. I'm trying to put it into other contexts outside of the Australian context in 5 more years' time. And like, sorry, in 10 years. So by the time I was 55. And there was, the greatest earning potential of my career was in the last sort of in the time between 45 and 55. So I would have been becoming like like promoted and all that kind of stuff and things. But at the time, a friend had passed away from a brain tumor. And a couple of other things had happened and messages and things. And I was just like, there is no guarantee that I would make 55 to access this super and then go off and change the world. But the advice that I got, I stopped seeking advice because it was just painting like the I don't want to say like the doom and gloom, but if someone can't see the value in what you're doing, maybe they're never going to see the value in what you're doing. And one of the things about like business plans and things like that, there was something that Joel Anderson, listener and viewer, if you go back to the episode, I think it's episode 9 in the first season, talking about like psychological safety in workplaces. And he had this amazing line where he said, if he was a psychologist, if he was a clinical psychologist and doing what he created in Formind, he would have created the same thing that had been done else. He would have been creating it properly and not the thing that was actually needed. And so when we are, dare I say, being a disruptor, as you have been, Pete, the like sometimes people won't understand what it is that you're trying to do, but those who need it will receive it.
Mm. Yeah. I will say this, Phil. It was that one meeting, that gentleman I mentioned earlier, Dr. Quam McKenzie,
Yeah.
who, when I found out what his credentials were, he's the head of psychiatry at the Canadian Mental Health, CAMH, Canadian, a mental health organization. I can't remember what the letters stand
It's
for.
late at night for you,
He
Pete. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He's the president and CEO of a think tank on, social determinants, of all sorts. And he's also a professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto. And when he told me that this was a brilliant idea and that it was just going to take time, and he's still on my board and is always open to having a chat, a coffee, or a bite to eat or a beer. He has been the person who let me know I wasn't crazy. And I think if we can find the people, we don't need lots of them. As we know, Robin Dunbar even says you need your 3 to 5 close friends. Who are your 3 to 5 people that you're going to pick up the phone and call when you're in your own head and you just need somebody to say, it's going to be okay. You're not crazy. And what you're doing is really important, because those are the people. And although I couldn't rhyme them all off my head, Phil, I would include you as one of those people. And there's probably 100 of them, and probably 50 of them don't know that they played a role.
Yeah.
But I would have gotten on a phone call with them at some point. I would have been saying, "Oh my God," because I took a break for 6 months. I talked about shutting it down at least a couple times, and yet I persisted. And I only persisted because I had enough people, including my wife, who were always there for me to say, no, 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 you're doing good. It's coming along. And it was,
Yeah.
every day I'd get an email or something from somebody who would say, oh my God, I have a teacher, quick story, very quick. It's a high school teacher in Toronto at a Catholic school who, for the first 3 years, every time I'd send out a newsletter, would send me an email and say, thank you for doing what you're doing. It means the world, and you're going to, I can't remember the specifics. And I have never met the person still today. And I sent him a note 6 months ago and I said, is it time for a coffee yet? And he said, not yet. And I still don't get the not yet, but those emails made all the difference in the world, to have somebody who is, working with young people reach out and say, your work is going to make a difference in the world. And
Yeah.
those are the things that kept me going.
Yeah. 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 It's an honor to play a small part in keeping you going because you play a part in keeping me going as well. And it is like I'm not going to lie, like there are times when, you're sort of looking and going, God, what's the point? What's the point? It does feel like really hard. It does feel really hard. I don't know about you, Pete, but then I sit for a moment and go, what am I going to do? What else can I do? And entertaining any other thought just makes me profoundly sad. Of like, doing anything else just makes me profoundly sad. And I'm like, oh, I'd rather be stumped, overwhelmed. I'd rather be a bit confused, a bit lost than sad. So, those fork in the road moments, I'm like, all right, I get like, it's what's the least worst of these two options? Like
Yeah.
continue or like continue another path. And it's funny, like I just get messages from you and you don't know this, like, but there's something, I just get messages from you that is like, hey, hey, God. It's like, oh, good, Pete's doing this too. That's right, Pete's doing this.
Mhm.
It is so, 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 so important. I just want to say thank you. And listener, if you want the other P word, another P word, perseverance. Um, but yeah, like you are like, yes, it is slowly but surely, poco a poco, you're changing the world. Pete, in a couple more questions. What's one piece of advice that you would give, that you could give, not would give, could give the listener and viewer who is experiencing loneliness right now? What's one piece of advice that you can give them?
I think it's, it's one piece of advice, but it's wrapped up in just a greater understanding that we all need human connection. We all crave it. The actions, as we talked about earlier in talking to a stranger, are simple. The research shows it's nearly 100% of the time that it ends up in a positive experience. So, when we can surround ourselves with the truth and the information, I hope that that can, ease the burden of, taking that first step. But there's also, it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said, I think the line is, you'll never know how little people think of you until you realize how little they think of you. And I think that is the true essence of somebody who is struggling with anxiety, who might be shy, who's worried about how other people are judging you. They're not. People are so busy. We are so caught up in our phones and our lives and what's going on in the world that if you, and Gillian Sandstrom says this, her first piece of advice for everybody is just try it, because we're pretty confident that if you try it, it'll probably work out okay.
One of the things that I love about asking that question, and I don't know if you knew it was coming, but I ask that of every guest. And I don't tell you that it's coming, because generally it comes from the heart. If it's a surprise, it comes from the heart. And I love that. I love that it's just like roll the dice, run the experiment. At worst, like you get data back, you get information. Um, but I love just the, yeah, and as you quoted uh Gillian Sandstrom there, but the give it a go. Love it. Love it.
And I think you actually said something there that I think is really important, Phil, is to recognize what the research shows. Jillian talks about this, is that the worst case scenario in almost all cases, the worst case is no reaction. And so somebody, you say good morning to somebody and they're grumpy and they just walk by you. They're not grumpy at you. They're grumpy because they probably had to deal with something this morning. Their kids spilled the cereal bowl on their briefcase, or, the dog ate their homework or their favorite book, or but just understand that everybody else is living crazy lives just like you are. And so a non-response or a grumpy response is not directed at you as much as it's directed at society and a world in which we've told people that talking to strangers is not something that we should do because we should be fearful. Absolutely not. We should all do it, and it will take time to get the world to all buy into the fact of the truth, which is this would actually be a great thing for all of us.
Yeah. Pete Bombaci, as always, it is such a pleasure to be in your company for just a few moments. And I'm sure that the listener and viewer is also thrilled that you followed that curiosity. We wish you absolutely nothing but success in shifting the needle, moving from the 1 yard to the 2 yard line. Um, you know, insert metaphor and example here, but a profound thank you, not only for having this conversation, but for the work you do it, and most importantly, how you're doing this work. So you might not feel that you have a choice in what you do, but you always have a choice in how you do it. And it's amazing to see how you do it.
Well, Phil McAuliffe, it is always a pleasure to chat with you. I'm happy we got a chance to do this together. And Humans Connecting is the Genwell partner from the other side of the world, brother from another mother. And I'm glad we connected many years ago, and that we still do connect, because at the end of the day, we are all in this together, and the world needs this movement and all our movements more than ever before.
Absolutely. I forgot to ask, how can people find you? What's the best way to connect with you if people feel called to share their thoughts with you?
Yeah, well, they can all check out our website at genwell.ca. It's a new website as of this year. And then my email is pete@genwellproject.org. And happy to hear from anybody. Happy to have conversations outside of this one, because having conversations is how we actually make positive change.
Absolutely. I'll put links to Pete's email and to the genwell.ca website in the description, in the episode description. Words are failing me right now. Must be time to wrap it up. Pete Bombaci, it is way past my bedtime for you in Toronto. Thank you so much for staying up and just being a fantastic guest on the Humans Connecting podcast.
Cheers, mate. Always good to see you.
After that fantastic conversation, I just wanted to spend a few moments with you to share some thoughts that really I hope that you can take with you as you work to become a connected human following this episode. So there's a couple of things there. First, I guess sort of going from the micro to the macro. So from you as an individual to something that we can do beyond ourselves. There's a few things that came up in there that for you, but the thing that really sticks out for me is how simple connection can be. And Pete gave us some great data from Gillian Sandstrom and others about the effectiveness of simply saying hello. It is so effective that Genwell in Canada has Talk to a Stranger Week. It has all sorts of, as Pete was saying, those initiatives, those campaigns built around doing something simple. Talk to a stranger, connect with your neighbors, the Genwell weekends in autumn and spring. It is devastatingly simple, but I know how hard it can be, simple as it might be, to get out of your head and actually engage with another human, and indeed engage within yourself with kindness and honesty to feed connection. It is devastatingly simple, but also can be really tough. But we've got to do it anyway. Because the red thread that wove through all of those points in the conversation was the word perseverance. And it's the red thread that links the micro within yourself through to the macro, the beyond yourself, and potentially even like changing the world. Because we need perseverance to continue to show up. We need perseverance to show up and choose connection. We need perseverance to show up and choose something different to the status quo. And loneliness moving towards becoming a connected human, and a connected human that potentially creates connected families, connected friendship groups, connected communities, connected societies, connected countries. A connected world requires a lot of perseverance. And that's not fun, that's not easy, that's often not glamorous, and sometimes it can be very hard work. It's not something that can be neatly wrapped up in an Instagram post. It's not something that, is as catchy as good vibes only, whatever it is. Perseverance is absolutely what's needed. Perseverance is what's needed when you've got a new idea and you think that it's that you have a feeling beyond even thinking, you have a feeling that it's something that those around you would serve, those around you will help you connect and will help others connect. And it takes perseverance to convince some others that it's a good idea and to invest in it or to, be part of it. And sometimes some will see the value in it and other times they won't. But if you feel that it's something that you need to do, persevere, please persevere. Because I so understand how hard it can be in the face of a whole sea of no's, how hard it can be to find the yes, how hard it can be to put yourself out there, to put your authentic self out there and to receive a whole lot of no's. It only takes one yes. And it takes perseverance to find that yes. It takes perseverance to find the response, whether it's a response to a hello, to the response to a business idea, to the response to having a difficult conversation with a partner, a loved one, a child, a parent, whatever it is. We must persevere. It's not glamorous, but that perseverance can absolutely change the world. So thank you to Pete for persevering. Thank you so much to everybody at Genwell in Canada for being such leaders in a positive social movement that helps humans improve their social health and well-being. Thank you so much for persevering over the past few years and continuing to persevere. That's it for this episode. Of course, we would love to hear what you got from this episode, what you're taking away from it, how you've used the goodness and wisdom, what landed for you, all of the things. We'd love to hear from you. So, as always, if you've got a comment, please feel free to reach out to respond on YouTube or through the comments on the service that you're now listening to this through. Also, send an email, I don't know, send a pigeon, whatever it is. Let us know. You know how feedback works. We'd love to hear how you're putting the lessons and the wisdom from this episode that Pete so generously poured into us, what you're taking from this. We'd love to hear from you. Be sure to check our website, humansconnecting.org, for details about how we can help you, your workplace, and your communities thrive through loneliness and get the connection that we each need and deserve. All of that is through humansconnecting.org, or reach out to us through any of the links in the episode description. We'd love to have a chat. And as always, we are here as a social enterprise to create and have a positive social impact. And if you're a business and are looking for ways to support humans to feel more connected and want to also make a positive social impact, and you want to make that with us, let's have a chat. Get connected with us through the link in the episode description. And that partnership could look like sponsorship of our podcast, or we're open to ideas. So feel free to reach out. We're here to change the world, and it's much more fun when we do that together. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much again to Pete Bombaci and for the whole team at Genwell in Canada. Thank you for doing what you do and how you do it. And to you, listener and viewer, can't wait to see you in the next episode. Until then, be awesome, and I'll see you later.